The alarm system screamed across every defense station orbiting Earth. Commander Hayek stood frozen for exactly 3 seconds as his screens filled with red warning lights. His coffee cup slipped from his hand and floated away in the zero gravity of the orbital platform. Above Earth, the stars themselves seemed to disappear as massive ships blocked out the light. "How many?" Hayek asked, his voice surprisingly steady. 247 capital ships, sir," his second officer replied. Her name was Dayoon, and she had been working the night shift when the sensors first detected them. They just appeared out of nowhere. No warning, no communication. The ships were enormous. Each one was easily 5 times the size of Earth's largest space station. They hung in space like metal mountains, their surfaces covered in weapons and strange glowing symbols. Hyuk had trained for this moment his entire career, but he never thought it would actually happen. First contact with alien life, and they were bringing an army. "Try to contact them," Hayek ordered. "All frequencies. Every language we have." Dayoon worked her console quickly, sending out messages in English, Mandarin, Spanish, and dozens of other Earth languages. She even tried mathematical sequences and music, hoping something would get a response. The alien ships remained silent. Then, without warning, small craft began pouring out of the larger vessels like angry insects from a disturbed nest. Down on Earth, people were just starting their day. In Seoul, South Korea, the morning sun was bright and warm. Captain Jiwon was drinking tea at a street cafe when his phone exploded with emergency alerts. Every soldier in the city received the same message at once: "Report to base immediately." This is not a drill. Jiwon threw money on the table and ran. Around him, other military personnel were doing the same. Civilians looked confused, checking their own phones and seeing news alerts about strange objects in the sky. Some people pointed upward, others took pictures. Most didn't understand what they were seeing yet. At the National Science Institute, researcher Minji was the first civilian to understand the gravity of the situation. She had been tracking unusual energy signatures in Earth's orbit for the past hour. When the military called her lab, she already had preliminary analysis ready. "They're not from our solar system," she told the general on the phone. "The energy readings are completely foreign. And sir, based on the power output I'm detecting, their weapons could level entire cities." The general thanked her and ended the call. Minji sat back in her chair, her hands shaking. She had spent her whole life searching for signs of alien life. She had written papers about peaceful first contact and cultural exchange. This was nothing like what she had imagined. Far away from Earth, in a region of space humans had never explored, the Galactic Council was watching. Their observation chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of different alien species. They sat in circular rows around a massive holographic display showing Earth and the attacking fleet. Counselor Thexal, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, stood before the assembly. "The Velkrin Armada has initiated contact with species 7841, designation humanity. Current projections give the humans 72 hours before complete planetary surrender." Most of the council members nodded. They had seen this before. The Velkrin were known across 12 star systems as conquerors. Their military had never lost a campaign. They were brutal, efficient, and overwhelmingly powerful. When the Velkrin chose a planet to invade, that planet fell. It was that simple. "Should we intervene?" asked a small reptilian counselor from the lower seats. Thexal's expression was difficult to read. "The council's policy is clear. We observe. We document. If humanity survives the next 72 hours, we will consider opening diplomatic channels. If they do not, we will add their species to the historical record." It sounded cold because it was. The Galactic Council had rules that had existed for thousands of years. Emerging species had to prove themselves worthy before receiving help or protection. Earth's test had arrived early, delivered by the most feared military force in the known galaxy. Back on Earth, the first landing craft touched down in major cities across the planet. Seoul, New York, Mumbai, London, Tokyo, and dozens of others. The doors opened and the Velkrin warriors emerged. They were massive creatures standing over 9 feet tall. Their armor was black and seemed to absorb light. In their hands, they carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Captain Jiwon reached his base just as the first reports came in. Velkrin troops had landed in the city center, less than 10 kilometers from his position. His commanding officer, Colonel Byung, was already organizing the response. "We don't know what we're facing," Byung said to the assembled soldiers. But we know our duty. Protect the citizens. Hold the line. Make every shot count. Jiwan looked at the faces of his fellow soldiers. Some were scared. Most looked determined. They had trained for war, but against other humans. This was different. This was something none of them could have prepared for. The first engagement happened in downtown Seoul. A Velcrin patrol encountered a South Korean army unit near City Hall. Both sides opened fire. The human bullets bounced off the Velcrin armor like raindrops. The alien weapons cut through concrete and steel like paper. Within minutes, half the human squad was dead or wounded. But they didn't retreat. They couldn't. Behind them were millions of civilians. Commander Daeun watched the battle feeds from orbit. Her station was too far away to help directly, but she could see everything. She watched human forces engage the Velcrin in Seoul, New York, and other cities. The casualty rates were terrible. For every Velcrin soldier killed, 20 humans died. But the humans kept fighting. They should be retreating, muttered one of her officers. They can't win these engagements. Daeun understood what he meant, but she also understood something else. Humans weren't fighting to win individual battles. They were fighting to buy time. Time for civilians to evacuate. Time for scientists like Minji to study the alien technology. Time for humanity to adapt. In the Galactic Council chamber, the observers were taking notes. The invasion was proceeding as expected. Human resistance was fierce but ultimately futile. The Velcrin were advancing on all fronts. Within 72 hours, Earth would fall, and humanity would become another footnote in galactic history. But Counselor Thexol noticed something unusual. Human forces were losing every major engagement, yet they weren't collapsing. They retreated in good order. They regrouped. They tried different tactics. When bullets failed, they tried explosives. When explosives failed, they tried ramming alien soldiers with vehicles. They were adapting faster than any species Thexol had seen before. On Earth, researcher Minji received her first intact piece of Velcrin technology. A crashed scout ship had been recovered outside of Seoul. She assembled a team and began studying it immediately. They had no idea how it worked, but they would figure it out. They had to. Commander Hyuk sent another message to Earth Command. The orbital defense stations are ready to engage when ordered. We can't stop all of them, but we can hurt them. The response came back quickly. Hold position. Do not engage unless Earth is directly threatened. We need to learn more about their capabilities. Hyuk hated waiting, but he understood. Humanity was in a fight for survival, and they were gathering every piece of information they could. The first 72 hours would be critical. The Velcrin expected victory. The Galactic Council expected humanity's defeat. Neither of them understood what they were dealing with. Earth wasn't just another planet. It was a world that had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and countless wars between its own people. Humanity had learned to survive against impossible odds. The Velcrin were about to learn that lesson the hard way. The 72 hours came and went. Earth did not surrender. The Velcrin commanders were confused. This had never happened before. Every other species had either surrendered or been completely destroyed within 3 days. But humanity was still fighting, and somehow they were fighting better than before. Engineer Soman had not slept in 4 days. Her eyes were red and her hands shook from too much coffee, but she had done it. The Velcrin power core sat on her lab table, partially disassembled, with human-made cables connecting it to Earth technology. It was working. Not perfectly, but it was working. "How long did you say this should take?" asked her supervisor, standing in the doorway with a shocked expression. "According to normal research protocols?" 3 to 5 years, Soman replied, not looking up from her work. "But we don't have 3 to 5 years. We have now." She had worked with a team of 12 engineers, all of them running on emergency rations and determination. They had reverse-engineered the basic principles of Velcrin power generation in 48 hours. Now they were building prototypes. Within 24 hours, the first human-made weapons powered by alien technology would be ready. In the military command center, strategist Jae-hyun was studying battle reports from across the globe. He had been a chess champion before joining the military, and he saw warfare the same way he saw chess. Every piece had a purpose. Every move created opportunities. The Velcrin were powerful, but they were also predictable. They fight in tight formations, Jaehyun explained to the generals gathered around his display table. They expect their enemies to scatter and run. When we retreat, they advance. When we advance, they hold position and overwhelm us with firepower. So how do we beat them? Asked General Taewon, a veteran of 3 previous conflicts. Jaehyun smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. We don't fight like they expect. We don't retreat. We don't advance in straight lines. We hit them from unexpected angles. We make them think they're winning, then we trap them. The strategy was simple but dangerous. Human forces would lure Velkrin units into urban areas where their heavy weapons were less effective. Then they would collapse the trap from all sides. It required perfect timing and soldiers willing to risk their lives as bait. Fortunately, Earth had no shortage of volunteers. Pilot Hana climbed into her fighter jet, checking her instruments one last time. The aircraft had been modified with Velkrin power cores and energy weapons. It looked like a normal Earth fighter, but it hit like an alien warship. She was part of the first squadron to test the new technology in combat. Red Squadron, this is command. You are cleared for takeoff. Target is the Velkrin capital ship in Orbit Zone 7. Hit it hard and get out. Hana's hands were steady on the controls. She had been a test pilot before the invasion, flying experimental aircraft. This was definitely experimental. If the modifications worked, they would prove that humans could adapt alien technology. If they failed, she and her squadron would be vaporized. The squadron launched. 12 fighters climbing through Earth's atmosphere at maximum speed. Velkrin sensors detected them immediately. The aliens had learned that Earth's primitive aircraft were no threat to their armored ships. They were wrong. Hana's targeting computer locked onto the capital ship. It was enormous, filling her entire windscreen. She armed the alien weapons and fired. Brilliant blue energy beams shot from her fighter, striking the Velkrin ship's hull. Explosions blossomed across the alien vessel's surface. Alarms started blaring inside the ship as the crew realized they were under attack by weapons that should not exist on this planet. "Direct hit! Direct hit!" shouted her wingman over the radio. "We hurt them!" The squadron made 3 more passes before Velkrin fighters could respond. By then, the capital ship was listing to one side, its engines damaged, its weapons offline. Hana led her squadron back to base, her heart pounding with adrenaline and triumph. Humans could fight back. They could win. In the Galactic Council chamber, the observers were no longer taking casual notes. They were standing, pointing at displays, arguing with each other. This was not supposed to happen. The humans should be defeated by now. Instead, they were attacking Velkrin capital ships with retrofitted primitive aircraft. "How is this possible?" demanded a counselor from the back rows. "They are a pre-spaceflight civilization." Counselor Thexal watched the replay of Hana's attack run. They learned. In 4 days, they learned to use Velkrin technology. No species has ever adapted this quickly. On the ground, Marine Dongyun led his unit through the ruins of downtown Seoul. They had received intelligence about a Velkrin command post in a commercial building. The mission was simple: capture it intact. They needed alien communication equipment to intercept enemy transmissions. Dongyun's unit moved silently through the rubble. They had learned that Velkrin sensors could detect active electronics, so they had turned off everything except basic radios. They moved like ghosts through the destroyed city streets. When they reached the building, Dongyun signaled his team to split up. The assault was quick and brutal. Human forces poured into the building from 4 directions at once. The Velkrin soldiers inside were caught completely off guard. They had been monitoring human communications, assuming they knew where all the nearby forces were. But Dongyun's unit had maintained radio silence. The element of surprise gave the humans exactly the advantage they needed. Within 15 minutes, the command post was captured. 3 Velkrin soldiers were taken prisoner, and the communication equipment was intact. Dongyun immediately set up a secure perimeter, while his technical specialist began downloading data from the alien systems. "Sir, you need to see this," the specialist said, his face pale. "They've been sending distress signals." "Distress signals to who?" "To the Galactic Council. They're asking for help. The Velkrin are asking for help." Dongyun almost laughed. The mighty conquerors who had invaded Earth were now begging for rescue. He made sure the message was recorded and sent to human command. This was propaganda gold. Across Earth, ordinary people were becoming warriors. Dr. Yunji worked 16-hour shifts at a military hospital, treating wounded soldiers. But at night, she did something else. She had studied chemistry before becoming a doctor. Now she used that knowledge to create explosives from common materials. Her makeshift bombs were used by resistance fighters across the city. Teacher Taiyang had spent 20 years teaching history to high school students. When the invasion began, he used his knowledge of the city to organize civilian evacuations. He knew every street, every building, every tunnel in Seoul. He created safe routes for millions of people, getting them out of combat zones while simultaneously providing intelligence to military commanders. The Velkrin had studied human history before invading. They knew about human wars and human divisions. They expected humanity to fracture under pressure, with different nations blaming each other and fighting among themselves. But the opposite happened. The invasion united Earth in a way nothing else ever had. Korean soldiers fought alongside American troops. Chinese scientists shared data with European researchers. African nations sent military supplies to Asia. The entire planet was working together for the first time in history. The Velkrin admiral sat in his command chamber reviewing casualty reports. His invasion force had lost 30% of its ground troops. 5 capital ships were destroyed or disabled. They had captured no major cities. Human resistance was strengthening, not weakening. This was supposed to be an easy conquest. Instead, it was becoming a nightmare. He opened a communication channel to the Galactic Council. His pride hated admitting weakness, but reality could not be ignored. This is Admiral Vexron of the Velkrin Armada. We are requesting immediate military support. The human resistance is more capable than anticipated. In the council chamber, this message caused chaos. The Velkrin never asked for help. They were the species other civilizations called when they needed military assistance. If the Velkrin could not defeat humanity, what did that mean? Councillor Thexel called for order. We must vote. Do we send reinforcements to the Velkrin, or do we intervene to stop the conflict entirely? The debate lasted for hours. Some councillors wanted to send more troops to crush humanity before they became a threat to the wider galaxy. Others argued for immediate peace negotiations. A few suggested simply destroying Earth from orbit before humans developed space travel. But Thexal noticed something that made him very nervous. The human broadcasts were no longer defensive. They were broadcasting messages in captured Velkrin language, and those messages were being transmitted to the invasion fleet. Thexal had the transmissions translated. What he read made his blood run cold. The messages were simple. You chose the wrong planet. We are humans. We survive. We adapt. We win. Surrender now or learn what happens when you wake up a sleeping predator. Human forces were not just defending anymore. They were beginning to counterattack. Units like Dongyun's were capturing Velkrin positions across the globe. Pilots like Hana were destroying alien ships in orbit. Engineers like Soman were creating new weapons faster than the Velkrin could adapt to them. Commander Huk watched from his orbital station as human spacecraft, barely functional and held, together with improvised repairs, began launching attacks on Velkrin ships. They were suicide missions. The Galactic Council's emergency session was the largest gathering in 300 years. Every member species had sent representatives. The chamber buzzed with hundreds of different languages and worried conversations. They were here to discuss what was being called the Earth problem. Councillor Thexal stood at the central podium, his forearms spread wide for attention. The situation has escalated beyond our initial projections. The Velkrin Armada has requested full military intervention. They are losing. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Losing. The Velkrin were losing to a pre-spaceflight species. It seemed impossible, but the evidence was clear. Human forces had pushed the aliens out of major population centers. They had destroyed or captured nearly half the invasion fleet. And most terrifying of all, they were learning from every encounter. We must send peacekeepers, Thexal continued, not to help the Velkrin conquer Earth, but to stop the conflict before it spreads. Before he could continue, the chamber doors opened. A human walked in, escorted by council guards. Ambassador Yuna strode down the central aisle, her military uniform still showing scorch marks from recent combat. She had been pulled from the front lines just 12 hours ago and given a crash course in galactic diplomacy. Now she stood before alien species that humanity had never known existed. The entire council fell silent. This was unprecedented. Earth was not a member species. They had no right to attend council sessions. Yet here stood a human, walking toward the podium as if she owned the place. Ambassador Yuna of Earth, Thexal said carefully. The council did not invite you to this session. Yuna stopped at the base of the podium. She looked up at Thexal with eyes that had seen too much combat in too few days. With respect, counselor, you don't get to invade someone's planet and then complain when they show up uninvited. A few counselors made sounds that might have been laughter. Most looked uncomfortable. Yuna continued speaking, her voice carrying through the massive chamber. We know you've been watching. We found Velcrin communication logs. They've been sending reports to you since before the invasion began. Thexal's expression remained neutral, but his hands tensed. The Council observes many situations across the galaxy. It is our duty to document emerging civilizations. Document? Yuna's voice rose. Is that what you call it? You watched while they killed millions of my people. You sat in your comfortable chamber and took notes while our cities burned. She pulled out a data device and tossed it onto the podium. It projected holographic images into the air above the council floor. Security footage showed council observers monitoring Earth's invasion in real time. Timestamps proved they had been watching from day one, doing nothing while humans died. 16 days, Yuna said, her voice shaking with controlled fury. For 16 days you watched. You could have stopped this. You could have warned us. Instead, you treated us like a science experiment. General Changmin, who had accompanied Yuna to the council station, stepped forward. He was older than Yuna, his hair gray and his face lined with years of military service. His uniform displayed medals from conflicts across decades. He transmitted additional data to the council displays. We have evidence, Changmin stated flatly. Intercepted communications between the Velcrin fleet and council observation posts. Discussions about Earth's defensive capabilities. Analysis of our weapons and tactics. All of this information existed before the first Velcrin ship entered our solar system. The council chamber erupted in noise. Councilors were shouting at each other, at Thexal, at the humans. Some demanded that Yuna and Changmin be removed. Others called for investigations. The noise was overwhelming until Thexal raised all four arms and called for silence. The council will not be accused of conspiracy, he said, his voice hard. We followed established protocols. Emerging species must prove their capability before receiving full council protection. The Velcrin invasion was unfortunate timing, Yuna laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Unfortunate timing? We have communication records showing that you knew the Velcrin were planning to attack Earth. You knew 3 months in advance, and you did nothing. She gestured to the holographic displays still floating in the air. You wanted to see what would happen. You wanted to test us. The Velcrin were your test subjects, and we were the experiment. The only problem is that your experiment didn't go the way you planned. Scientist Minho stood up from the human delegation seats. He was younger than Yuna and Changmin, still in his 30s, but he had been part of the team that reverse-engineered Velcrin technology. He carried several devices that made the council's security staff very nervous. We analyzed everything we captured, Minho explained, his voice calm and professional. Velcrin weapons, power systems, propulsion technology, communication arrays. Do you want to know what we found? It's primitive. Compared to what we expected from a spacefaring civilization, it's surprisingly simple. He placed one of the devices on a display table. It was a power core, human-made, but based on Velcrin designs. This is our version. We built it in 6 days. It's 30% more efficient than the Velcrin original. We improved their technology in less than a week. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. The Council had assumed that any spacefaring species would be technologically superior to Earth. But humans had looked at alien technology and immediately found ways to make it better. What would they be capable of with actual resources and time? Counselor Thexal felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. What is it you want, Ambassador? Yuna's expression hardened. Earth demands immediate Council membership with full voting rights. We demand access to all galactic technology databases. We demand reparations for the lives lost during an invasion you could have prevented, and we demand a formal apology. That's not how council membership works, protested a counselor from the upper seats. Emerging species must apply through proper channels. There are procedures, evaluations, cultural assessments. We followed your procedures, Changmin interrupted. We were peaceful. We minded our own business on our own planet. And you sent an invasion fleet to test us. So now we're writing new procedures. Commander Hyuk's hologram appeared in the chamber, transmitted from Earth orbit. Counselors, I want you to look out your windows. Look at the ships surrounding this station. The council members who could move to the observation ports. Surrounding the council station were 40 human spacecraft. They had been built in the past 3 weeks using captured Velcrin manufacturing facilities and human ingenuity. They were rough, unpolished, and held together with improvised repairs. But they were armed with weapons that worked, powered by reactors that humans had designed themselves. And they were aimed at the station. Those are our diplomats, Hyuk said from his hologram. That's what we built in 3 weeks while fighting off an invasion. Imagine what we'll build in 3 months. Or 3 years. Do you really want to find out what happens if you make Earth your enemy? The threat was clear. The Council could accept Earth's demands or they could fight. But fighting meant war with a species that had just defeated the Velcrin, using nothing but captured technology and determination, a species that improved alien technology in days, a species that adapted so quickly that traditional warfare became useless against them. Counselor Thexall looked at the data again. Human casualty reports, Velcrin losses, the timeline of technological adaptation. He had been on the Council for 70 years. He had seen hundreds of emerging species. None of them had ever done anything like this. The Council requires time to deliberate, he finally said. You have 6 hours, Yuna replied. After that, we'll assume you're not interested in peace. The humans left the chamber. Behind them, the Council erupted into arguments. Some wanted to call Earth's bluff. Others wanted to destroy Earth immediately before humans developed into a galactic threat. A wise few understood that both options would end in disaster. In the human delegation's quarters, Yuna sat down heavily. Her legs were shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. She had just threatened the ruling body of galactic civilization. Either it would work or Earth would be at war with everyone. Do you think they'll accept? Asked Minho, looking worried. General Changmin was checking reports from the fleet outside. They don't have a choice. We proved we can hurt them. But more importantly, we proved we can learn. That scares them more than our weapons. Commander Hyuk's voice came through their communication system. Update from Earth. The Velcrin are surrendering. Not just retreating, surrendering. They're requesting protection from us. The humans looked at each other in disbelief. The species that had invaded Earth with an unstoppable fleet was now begging humanity for protection. The irony was almost funny. What should we do with them? Yuna asked. Changmin thought for a moment. We offer them the same choice we're giving the Council. Work with us, share knowledge, become allies, or stay our enemies. But we don't execute prisoners and we don't commit genocide. We're better than that. 6 hours later, the Galactic Council reconvened. Counselor Thexall looked tired. The debate had been fierce, but in the end, reality won over pride. The Council accepts Earth's petition for membership, he announced. Full voting rights will be granted. Technology she crews knew they probably would. The galaxy was not ready for what humanity became. Admiral Seojin walked through the shipyard orbiting Earth, watching construction crews work on humanity's first true space fleet. It had been 6 months since the Council accepted Earth's membership. 6 months since the Velcrin surrendered. In that time, humans had accomplished what most species took decades to achieve. How many ships operational? Seojin asked his chief engineer. 47 combat vessels, 12 scout ships, and 8 heavy carriers, the engineer replied. Another 20 under construction. We'll have 100 ships within the year. Seojin nodded, watching sparks fly as welders worked on a destroyer's hull. These were not the improvised ships they had thrown together during the invasion. These were purpose-built warships designed from scratch using the best of human and alien technology. They were faster than Velcrin cruisers. They hit harder than Council peacekeepers. And they were crewed by humans who had learned warfare in the hardest school imaginable. On the Council homeworld, the Military Advisory Committee was in session. The topic was Earth, as it had been for most meetings over the past 6 months. Counselor Thexall reviewed reports with growing concern. Human military doctrine has been requested by 47 member species, an aide reported. They want to learn human tactics and training methods. Thexal scrolled through the requests. Species that had been spacefaring for thousands of years were asking humans, who had barely left their own planet, to teach them how to fight. It should have been humiliating. Instead, it was practical. Humans had proven that they understood war in ways the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. The Velcrin had been the galaxy's premier military force for centuries. They conquered planets through overwhelming firepower and intimidation. But humans had beaten them using strategy, adaptation, and a willingness to sacrifice that shocked everyone who witnessed it. Now the galaxy wanted to learn those secrets. Captain Hana was one of the first humans assigned to train alien pilots. She stood in a simulator bay on a council training station, watching a class of pilots from 6 different species attempt a combat scenario. They were failing badly. "Stop, stop, stop," Hana called out, shutting down the simulation. "You're flying like you have all the time in the world. You don't. When you're outnumbered, when your weapons are inferior, you can't fight fair. You have to be faster, more aggressive, and willing to take risks." A tall alien pilot with green skin raised a hand. "But the manual says to maintain safe distance and use superior firepower." "The manual assumes you have superior firepower," Hana replied. "What happens when you don't? What happens when the enemy is stronger, faster, and better equipped? That's what we faced during the invasion. We didn't have the luxury of fighting by the book." She reset the simulation. "Watch this." Hana climbed into a simulator pod and ran the same scenario. She was outnumbered 5-1. Her simulated weapons were inferior and her ship had less armor than the enemy. The alien pilots expected her to retreat or use defensive tactics. Instead, she attacked immediately, flying her ship directly at the enemy formation. She used debris fields for cover, made unpredictable course changes, and targeted the enemy's weakest ships first to even the odds. Within 3 minutes, all 5 enemy ships were destroyed. Hana's ship was damaged but functional. The alien pilots stared at the results in silence. "That's human combat doctrine," Hana explained, climbing out of the pod. "We don't fight to survive. We fight to win. There's a difference." Across the galaxy, similar lessons were being taught. Human soldiers trained alien troops in ground combat. Human engineers consulted on ship designs. Human strategists advised planetary defenses. Earth had become the galaxy's military academy in less than a year. But not everyone was happy about humanity's rise. In a private chamber on a distant station, representatives from 12 species met in secret. They called themselves the Preservation Coalition. Their goal was simple: limit human expansion before it was too late. "They're dangerous," insisted a delegate from the Thorian Empire. "In 6 months, they've built a fleet that rivals our own. In a year, they'll surpass us. In 5 years, they could dominate the entire sector. The council should have destroyed them when we had the chance," muttered another delegate. "Now it's too late. They're protected by council law." The coalition discussed options: economic sanctions, trade restrictions, political pressure. But deep down, they all knew the truth. They were afraid. Humanity had proven that technological superiority didn't guarantee victory. The younger, smaller species had beaten the great Velcrin Empire. What could they do to an older, more established civilization? On Earth, life was slowly returning to normal. Cities were being rebuilt. Casualties were being mourned. But humanity was also looking outward in ways they never had before. Space exploration, once a dream for a small number of astronauts, had become a national priority for every nation on the planet. Engineer Somin led a research team working on faster-than-light travel. The technology existed in the galaxy, but human scientists wanted to improve it. They wanted ships that could travel farther, faster, and more efficiently than anything currently in use. "The Council's FTL drives are reliable but slow," Somin explained to her team. "They're designed for long-term safety and stability. But what if we're willing to trade some safety for speed?" Her team worked around the clock, testing new theories and pushing the boundaries of known physics. They failed constantly. Prototypes exploded. Calculations proved incorrect. But they learned from every failure, adapted, and tried again. It was the human way. Meanwhile, General Changmin was dealing with a different problem: the Velcrin prisoners of war. Over 15,000 Velcrin soldiers were currently held in facilities across Earth and in orbital stations. According to galactic law, they should be returned to their empire. But Changmin had a different idea. We're offering them a choice, he explained to the Council Oversight Committee. Return to the Velcrin Empire and face whatever punishment their own people decide, or join Earth's military as auxiliary forces. The Council representatives looked shocked. You want to recruit your former enemies? Why not? Changmin replied. They're trained soldiers. They know Velcrin tactics better than anyone. And frankly, they've seen what happens when you underestimate humans. Most of them would rather work with us than against us. It was an insane idea by galactic standards. But to humans, who had a long history of integrating former enemies into their societies, it made perfect sense. Within 3 months, over 8,000 Velcrin soldiers had accepted the offer. They swore loyalty to Earth and began training alongside human forces. Warrior Kethal was one of them. He had been part of the initial invasion force landing in Seoul during the first wave. He had fought humans for 16 days before being captured. Now he wore an Earth military uniform and trained human soldiers in Velcrin combat techniques. Why did you switch sides? A young human recruit asked him during a training session. Kethal thought about the question. Because I understand now. The Velcrin Empire conquers the weak, but you humans are not weak. You are something else, something stronger. I would rather fight beside you than against you. The recruit seemed satisfied with that answer. Kethal didn't mention the other reason. He had seen what happened to Velcrin forces that kept fighting humans. They died. Every single one. Humans didn't give up, didn't surrender, and didn't stop until they won. Joining them was not cowardice. It was survival. Scientist Minho was working on a different project. The council had agreed to share their technology databases, and he was mining them for useful information. But he was also noticing what was missing. The galaxy's technology had stagnated. Most of the tools and weapons being used were thousands of years old with only minor improvements. They stopped innovating, Minho explained to a research conference. They reached a certain level of technology and then just maintained it. They're not looking for breakthroughs anymore. They're satisfied with what they have. Why? Asked a fellow scientist. Fear, probably. New technology means change. Change means risk. Most galactic species have existed for so long in peace that they've forgotten how to adapt. Minho pulled up comparative charts. Look at human technological growth over the past century compared to any galactic species. We're advancing exponentially. They're advancing linearly, if at all. The implications were clear. Given enough time, humanity would not just catch up to galactic technology. They would surpass it. And they would do it within decades, not centuries. Ambassador Yuna attended her first regular council session as Earth's official representative. She took her seat among delegates from hundreds of worlds, species that had been part of galactic civilization for thousands of years. She was younger than most of them by decades or even centuries, but she held the same voting power. The session was discussing trade agreements and border disputes, normal political business. But Yuna noticed how other delegates watched her, some with curiosity, some with respect, many with fear. Earth's delegate was the reminder that the galaxy had changed. The old rules no longer applied. During a break, Counselor Thexol approached her. How is Earth adjusting to galactic membership? We're learning, Yuna replied honestly. It's overwhelming sometimes. 6 months ago, we thought we were alone in the universe. Now we're sitting in a council chamber. 5 years had passed since the Velcrin invasion. The galaxy barely recognized itself anymore. Captain Hana commanded the defense fleet for Sector 9, protecting 23 colony worlds from pirates and raiders. Her flagship was a heavy cruiser named the Indomitable, crewed by humans and aliens working side by side. She stood on the bridge reviewing patrol reports when the alert came in. Captain, we have distress calls from mining colony Theta 7. They're under attack by raider forces. 30 ships heavily armed. Hana was already moving. Battle stations. Plot intercept course. Communications, send word to nearby council forces that were responding. The Indomitable and her escort ships jumped to faster-than-light speed. They arrived at Theta 7 within the hour. The raider fleet was already looting the colony, their ships hovering over the settlement like vultures. When they saw Hana's fleet arrive, they prepared to fight. Then they saw the Earth insignia on the hulls. The raiders ran. All 30 ships abandoned their attack and jumped to FTL immediately. They didn't even try to fight. They just fled at the sight of human warships. Hana almost felt insulted. Should we pursue? Her first officer asked. Hana shook her head. No need. They'll spread the word. This sector is protected by Earth forces. Raiders will think twice before hitting our colonies again. The colony administrator, A reptilian alien named Sisk contacted Hana personally to express gratitude. "Thank you, Captain. We've requested Council protection for months, but they said this sector was low priority. Then Earth took over security and suddenly we're safe." "That's what we do," Hana replied simply. "We protect people." It was true. Earth's military had become the galaxy's most requested security force. Human ships patrolled trade routes. Human soldiers guarded colonies. Human officers trained planetary defense forces. What had started as Earth defending itself had evolved into Earth defending everyone who asked for help. Engineer Soman stood in the research facility on Mars, watching the test of her newest creation. The prototype ship in the testing bay was small, barely larger than a fighter craft. But it represented a breakthrough that would change everything. She had finally cracked the problem of faster-than-light travel. "Initiating jump sequence," a technician announced. The ship vanished. Not slowly, not with a flash of light like standard FTL drives. It simply ceased to exist in one location and appeared in another, instantaneously. The distance covered was minimal for this test, just a few thousand kilometers. But the implications were massive. "It works," Soman breathed. "It actually works." Standard galactic FTL drives bent space, allowing ships to travel faster than light but still requiring time to cross distances. Soman's drive did something different. It folded space completely, allowing instantaneous travel between 2 points. The energy requirements were enormous and the range was currently limited. But it worked. Within 6 months, the first human ships equipped with fold drives would be operational. They could respond to emergencies anywhere in the sector instantly. They could strike targets before enemies even knew they were there. It was a strategic advantage that would make Earth's military even more formidable. On Earth, in a rebuilt conference center in Seoul, the 5-year memorial ceremony was being held. Millions had died during the Velcrin invasion. Every year, humanity paused to remember them. Ambassador Yuna gave the keynote speech, her hair now showing streaks of gray from years of diplomatic stress. "We remember those who fell defending Earth," Yuna told the assembled crowd. "We remember the soldiers who held the line, the civilians who evacuated under fire, the scientists who worked until exhaustion, the teachers, doctors, engineers, and everyday people who became heroes because they had to. They fought so that we could stand here today. They died so that humanity could have a future among the stars." The crowd was silent. In attendance were humans, Velcrin, and dozens of other species. Former enemies standing together to honor the dead. It was a powerful symbol of how much had changed. After the ceremony, General Chang Min, now promoted to Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces, met with Velcrin Commander Kethel. Kethel had risen through the ranks of Earth's military, earning respect through skill and dedication. He now led an entire division of mixed human and Velcrin troops. "How are your soldiers adapting?" Chang Min asked. "Better than expected," Kethel replied. "The younger Velcrin especially. They've never known anything but cooperation with humans. To them, this is normal," Chang Min nodded. "Good. We have a mission coming up. Council wants peacekeepers sent to the disputed territories. Border conflict between 2 member species. They specifically requested human-led forces. Because we're the only ones they trust to be impartial? Because we're the only ones they're afraid to lie to," Chang Min corrected with a slight smile. "Humans have a reputation now. We don't tolerate nonsense. We see through political games, and we're not afraid to call out powerful species when they're wrong." It was true. Earth's representatives had earned a reputation for blunt honesty in council politics. While other species engaged in centuries-old diplomatic dances, humans simply said what they thought. It was refreshing to some, terrifying to others. In the Galactic Council chamber, Councillor Thexal was presenting the annual report on galactic security. The statistics were remarkable. Piracy had decreased by 60%. Border conflicts had dropped by 40%. Illegal weapons trafficking was down by 70%. The reason was clear: human military presence. Earth forces have been deployed to 83 sectors over the past 5 years, Thexal reported. In every case, security improved dramatically. Crime rates dropped. Confidence in council protection increased. Member species feel safer, but at what cost? Demanded a counselor from the Preservation Coalition. Earth now has military forces in nearly a third of council space. They're becoming too powerful. Thexal had anticipated this argument. Earth has the largest military, yes, But they also respond to more crisis situations than any other three species combined. They do the work that others refuse to do. Because they're aggressive. Because they're effective, Thexol countered. And more importantly, because they're willing. How many council species have military forces protecting alien colonies? How many patrol trade routes far from their own borders? Earth does these things not for profit or territory, but because they believe it's right. The debate continued, but Thexol knew the outcome. The Council needed Earth's military. They had become dependent on it. In 5 years, humanity had made themselves indispensable to galactic security. Dr. Unji, now serving as Earth's chief medical officer for galactic affairs, was revolutionizing xenomedicine. She had spent 5 years studying alien biology and combining human medical knowledge with galactic healing techniques. The results were astounding. Diseases that had plagued certain species for generations were being cured. Injuries that were previously fatal could now be treated. The key is understanding that every species evolved differently, Yunji explained at a medical conference. But the basic principles of biology are universal. Cells need energy. Organs serve functions. Bodies fight disease. Once you understand the underlying patterns, you can develop treatments that work across species. She demonstrated a new surgical technique that combined human microsurgery with alien regeneration technology. Alien doctors watched in amazement as she repaired complex tissue damage that they had considered untreatable. Human medicine, developed through thousands of years of war and disease, had given Earth insights that more advanced species had never considered. Scientist Minho had become the director of Earth's Advanced Research Division. His team was no longer just adapting alien technology. They were inventing new technology that impressed even the most advanced species. Weapons that were more efficient, shields that were stronger, power systems that were cleaner. How do you innovate so quickly? Asked a visiting alien researcher. Minho thought about the question. I think it's because we're not afraid to fail. Most galactic species have perfected their technology over thousands of years. They're afraid to change it because change might make things worse. But humans are used to failure. We've failed countless times throughout our history. We've learned that failure is just part of the process. He pulled up designs for a new ship class. This is our next project. A science vessel that can explore regions of space that are currently too dangerous. High radiation zones, extreme gravity wells, black hole peripheries, places where traditional ships can't go. Why would you want to go to such dangerous places? Mino smiled. Because they're there. Because we don't know what we might find. Because humans are curious, and curiosity drives us to take risks. That curiosity, that willingness to take risks, had defined humanity's rise. While other species played it safe, humans pushed boundaries. While others maintained the status quo, humans demanded progress. It made them unpredictable, dangerous, and absolutely vital to galactic advancement. The Preservation Coalition held another secret meeting. Their membership had shrunk from 12 species to 7. The others had abandoned the cause, recognizing that opposing Earth was futile. The remaining members were desperate. We must act now, insisted the Thorian delegate.